Well, good morning and welcome. We are officially starting the Board of Regents Research and Academic Affairs Committee meeting. We're going live in Zoom and over YouTube. And I just want to remind the audience that the Regents as well as presenters are participating in these meetings, both by phone and via Zoom. So first up, we have some future action items, all of which will be presented by our Provost, Elizabeth Chilton. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the meeting on over to our Provost.
Hello and good morning. So we have three future action items.
Bottled water does anywhere.
On our agenda, and should be in your packet. We have the establishment of a Master of Applied Economics degree, establish a Master of Engineering and Civil Engineering degree, and establish a Master of Science in Business Administration degree. Rather than go, since the material is pretty detailed in your packet, what I will say is that each of these three proposals was reviewed by my office and has my support. And it was also recommended by the Faculty Senate this spring. And you can see in the description the dates that it was approved by the Faculty Senate as well. And the college dean as well supported it, and the college leadership in each case. I'm happy to receive any questions and hopefully I'm able to answer them. But these are future action items for your consideration.
So I'll just read the three different future action items and we can take them each one by one if there's any specific questions. But the first is to establish a Master's of Applied Economics degree. The second is to establish a Master's of Engineering in Civil Engineering degree. And the third is to establish a Master of Science in Business Administration degree. So with that, I will open up the conversation to see if any of my fellow regents have any questions that you would like to ask around any of these three future action items.
I had a question for the provost. For number 3, just for information, the Master of Science in Business Administration, how is that different from your MBA?
I can answer.
Yes, please.
So an MBA is a professional degree, and it's actually, the MBA is part of the, I believe it goes through our Academic Affairs Committee. This is a graduate degree, and so this was vetted by the Graduate Studies Committee.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? So at the last committee meeting that we had, there were a few different items that we actually ended up, instead of moving to a future action item, we went ahead and moved them into a consent agenda for the Regent meeting. And this one has a similar timeline and trajectory. So with the idea that we'd like to be able to offer these in the fall, the thought process is that we, if agreed upon by the committee, could move these to a consent agenda on Friday's Regent meeting, unless anyone has any concerns with that. So I wanted to open that conversation up as well.
Lisa, how do we do this?
Hi, Laura.
I can take my mask down. Yeah. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I thought all these proposals were very, very clear. I think they're all really good ideas. So I'd be very in favor of putting them on the consent agenda. I don't think there's anything controversial about them at all.
Great.
And people, if somebody has a question, they can always take it off.
Yeah, I agree with that, since we've been looking at these for some time now. So
Excellent. Any hesitation from anyone else?
I think you have consensus, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. I will say I was surprised some of these weren't already being offered. So I think that moving them to consent and making sure that we have them available for students in the fall makes sense. So with the committee's agreement, we will state for the record that these 3 future action items will move forward on the Friday, May 7th consent agenda for the board's consideration. Okay. We're moving right along this morning. So the next item on our agenda is an update and items that were approved under delegated authority. So I want to go ahead and pass this back on over to our provost.
Thank you, Regent Schauer. So first of all, the faculty manual revisions, the Faculty Senate recommended approval for revisions to the faculty manual. They include, for example, wording about the investigation of complaints or of provost concerns, some faculty furlough and temporary salary reduction in a time of budgetary crisis. That is a new addition to the faculty manual. A review of faculty moving teaching portfolio instructions out of the faculty manual into the provost guidelines for promotion and tenure. And finally, changing the reference of calendar days to business days throughout the manual. And details on the exact changes to the faculty manual, I believe are available in your packet. I don't have the full packet right here, but the details on the exact wording changes are there. So that is an update, something that we typically have delegated authority under the president. Any questions on those before I go to the other 2 categories? Okay. Secondly, establishment of centers. The Faculty Senate recommended approval to establish the Center for Cannabis Policy, Research, and Outreach, and a Center for Professional Sales. Any questions on those 2? And then finally, the renaming of a department. The Faculty Senate recommended approval to rename the Department of Biomedical Sciences to the Department of Translational Medicine and Physiology. These were all submitted to President Schultz, and they were all passed by the Faculty Senate during the spring semester. So those are my informational item updates, Regent Schauer.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
You know, actually, Lisa,
Yep.
I have one, and it's more of a general question. And so, for example, later on in the strategic and operational excellence, we actually have a renaming of the Paul G. Allen School. Here, as an information item, it's a renaming. So what's the difference about when it has to come for action by the Regents and when it's something that it can be approved, you know, by you or by Kirk?
My understanding was it's the difference between Desiree will tell me.
It's the difference between a major or minor facility. This is a major programmatic, well, not programmatic change, but so for the school, the renaming of the school, it's a major facility. It has to come to the Regents. Because the president can do the minor.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. And I can get a copy of that policy to you so you can see it. There's actual Port of Regents policy on it.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I just wasn't sure of just what was what, but I'm trusting that you all make sure it is.
The building is associated with the school, so it's a larger organizational unit. We have so many departments that the delegated authority is for the department level within schools and colleges.
Okay, all right, thank you. That was my only question.
That was a good question. I was thinking that, but I hadn't asked it. So thank you for asking that question. Greg, any insight that you want to share? Any comments around these updates from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess one thing I wanted to point out, because I think it's important, is that in the faculty manual changes that happened, our faculty affairs committee, led by Steve Hines, who is retiring, and also Laura Greiner Hill was instrumental in this. During this whole issue with COVID and the fiscal cliffs and emergencies that we faced, the faculty manual had no language in it other than fiscal or exigency in terms of temporary salary reductions for faculty. And we're one of the few faculty in the state that aren't collective bargaining. So the faculty came together to make this change through Faculty Senate in a advocacy role to help protect our career track faculty as well as our instructional staff. We got decimated by the Great Recession. With those are the levers that we can turn, career track faculty and instructional staff. And so this, I think, was significant that the faculty said, we are willing collectively in the state, in a financial crisis, to take a reduction in salary to help protect jobs. And I think that spoke volumes of the work of the Faculty Affairs Committee and the leadership of that committee, as well as the Provost Office. And that took a year of work.
No, I do want to, both thank Greg and the Faculty Senate, and it was really quite remarkable. We were looking at potential furloughs and salary reductions at WSU. We ended up not having to do that this year, but when we were looking at it, it would have affected everyone except for faculty. And the faculty realized that there were equity issues there, and really took the initiative to take this on themselves. And I really just want to express my thanks for that really progressive work.
Thanks for sharing that, Greg. I think this just again speaks to the importance of having you and your role represented on the Board of Regents. I wouldn't have maybe gotten that insight had you not been able to share that. And it is really, to use our provost word, remarkable and worth applauding. So thank you to the faculty for their leadership around this. I think it's really outstanding. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, are we ready to move on to the Office of Research update? Does anyone have anything else they want to share or ask about in our first update item? Okay, hearing none. Vice President Keene, would love to have you give us a bit of an update. You're on mute.
You'd think eventually. Great, Regent Shower, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. Let me share a few slides here. Okay, so there we go. Okay, can you see that okay? Let's see, it's moving. Okay, how's that? Can you see the agenda there?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, all right, great, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the briefly what we're going to talk about today. So I'll just make a few comments right here. Then I'm basically going to give a short talk updating on research expenditures. You may remember at our last meeting I talked about we have to make some corrections due to basically foundation contribution to expenditures and so on. I've got the numbers to show you very briefly. Then I'll also show a bit of information on award trends. Vis-a-vis age, faculty rank, and so on. Greg, this was in response to a comment you raised at the last meeting, and also the fact we discussed this on this committee before. And then finally, I'll turn it over to Daryl next for an intro, and then we'll have just we'll hear about some of the exciting research going on in health sciences from Celestine and John, who are all on the call. So that's our agenda for today. So let me just start in with the expenditures topic. So this right here is the slide of WSU's research expenditures versus year for, a long historical period back to the 90s. You can see the increase there. The different colors represent different components, working your way up from the bottom view of federal appropriations and grants and contracts, et cetera, state, industry, Institutional support, which is what we're going to talk about today briefly, that includes all manner of things, cost share, internal expenses, but also includes money from the foundation donations that are relevant to research, and that's what I'll cover, and then a little bit there at the top on other. That's what it's looked like historically. As I mentioned at the last meeting, we recently found some basically internal coding errors in our internal research office that does these calculations on expenditures. I guess I should say, by the way, I wish that calculating research expenditures is as simple as adding up what we spend and you're done. Not so simple. That reflects both our accounting system, okay, and also actually we use approximations to generate some of these numbers. Some of these numbers are actually research items unto themselves. So I wish it was simple, but it's not. In any event, we found some mistakes in how they were calculated. And what that resulted in was, see those black areas, those basically have to be removed. There was an overcount in terms of our donations, okay? And so that's now been dealt with. And so this is actually what the curves look like, okay, right now. So those overcounts in 17, 18, 19 have been removed. Why? So there was errors in 17, 18, 19, perhaps earlier too, but in fact, we could only, at the National Science Foundation that keeps track of this data, could only adjust things back to 17, hence that's what we've turned in. So let me show one more curve, one more thing here. This is a little expansion just for the years 2010 to 2020 at the various components of the research expenditures I showed earlier. So instead of a bar, just basically a line chart showing the elements. Let me just talk about each of these briefly. So take a look at the federal contribution, the orange line at the top part of the slide. That's nice, that's going up, okay? And that represents a lot of the hard work done by our faculty, staff, and administrators, all of you here, as well as folks like Colleen's group and Glinda working on the federal side, numerous offices, Gita, Dutta, and my office helping on proposals, all our folks working with the industry and some of the other lines. So lots of contributors here. The blue is the institutional component where I talked about earlier was the issue. I'll come back to that in a second. You can see the state component there, which reflects some spending coming out of the financial crisis in 09. There's a little bump there, but it's largely been relatively flat, as is industry and direct federal appropriations, and then a few other things. So overall, that's the picture. I just wanted to mention that, as future work on this, we're going to do two things. One, we'll continue to improve the numbers, and Workday will be a huge help here. So moving forward, we will have more accurate research expenditures in all categories, thanks to Workday. The other piece is the institutional line there has a funny drop off from 16 to 17. I think right now that's an artifact of some of the mistakes we've been fixing. We're still working to look at that in more detail. So hopefully, that will change too, but right now it doesn't actually square up with other data we have. So anyway, moving forward, to remember, Workday will make an enormous difference. We'll do this better, reporting in the future, and we'll just continue to endeavor to make this as accurate as we can. So that's the status of those numbers. So let me just stop on that one and see if there are any questions.
I had a question, Dr. Keene.
Yes, Regent Blankenship.
So we have both graphs show state breakout and an industry breakout.
Right.
I have to make an assumption. We have some active commodity commissions in the state that partner with
yes,
probably ag for research. So are they considered on that industry line, or since they're state agencies, are they part of the state line, or
both.
is the state only appropriated funds?
It's both, Regent Blankenship. I think that the short summary is what you'll see in the state line represents a lot. We get funding from the state for sort of internal operations of labs and facilities. That's what's in the state line, okay? The commission money that comes in is actually, in some of it's in the state, some of it's in the industry, depending where it comes from. If it's a state commission, it will be in the state line, but we also have some direct funds that come in from various industries that are members of the commission. So, but it's in there between the industry and the state.
Chris?
Yeah. Hi, Laura. Here's your call.
Laura's fine. I want to ask a little bit more about what's in that industry line. And, you know, WSU over the years has had an office which has really tried to push engagement with industry and showing the value of our research and assistance as a land grant institution, yet that line is just very, very flat.
Yeah.
Any comments?
Yeah. Let's see. My first comment is I would love to talk about that more next time. Okay. I have some slides that show the full range of industry related research. For example, one thing that's not in that line, Regent Powell, is SBR, SBIR funds from the government, okay, that we get as a result of our innovative companies, right? They're not in that line, they're in the federal line. And so there are other sources. So the industry line are things we get pretty much directly from industry for things like a research partnership or something else, or a directed contract. But there are other contributions that are reflected elsewhere in this chart, right? A fair amount on the federal side and other things. With that said, you know, you're right. We are working to increase relationships with industry. Again, I can go through this next time, but we've simplified our contracting procedures now. We have quite a few smaller contracts now that we've launched in sort of the few tens of K range, which are hard to see in something this scale, but are the seed of what we hope will be something bigger, right? So there's a much bigger story here than in that one line, which I'd be glad to take this group through.
Yeah, I would very much be interested in that.
Yeah.
And then also here, if in talking with industry, are there any impediments to working with WSU?
Great question, because yeah.
Which rights, stuff like that, you know.
Well,
so,
yes, and a big part of
today.
Yeah, a big part of our efforts removing those, Regent Powell. I just mentioned one earlier, contracting. We have some simplified contracting vehicles now that are a page or two long to get going. I mean, you know, when you're meeting with an industry, you don't want to spend the first 6 to 12 months of your relationship talking about IP, right? You want to get going, right? And so we've implemented things to do that. So I'll go through it next time.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
It might also, just one quick follow-up, it might also be helpful just because each of us are coming at this from a different perspective and understanding, just to not only explore, as Laura mentioned, the industry line, but even just a sample of what is within the state, the institutional and the federal grants and contracts in terms of the differences. So I'll just add it as a note for us to talk about at the next meeting.
Yeah, I can bring a little bit more in each of these components next time, for sure.
Thank you.
We'll do that. Okay, great. So let me now turn to the second part of this, which is just a brief discussion on some award trends. So the rest of this talk is basically background information, just to make you aware, and again, we can pursue these if you like. So first of all, what I've plotted here is along the x-axis there, you can see the different award ranges we have, and then the number of awards is shown there along the vertical axis. So you can see that far and away, most of our awards are less than 100K. And Regent Blankenship, to your comment, a significant number of those are very small awards from the agricultural industry, actually. All kinds of work Connors does with industry directly, and that's why one of the reasons that number is so big. Okay, as you go up in award size, you see the number go down. Okay, and that's just kind of what it is. But if you then look at the total value within each of those ranges, it's kind of interesting. The total value in those ranges is, you know, pretty similar actually. So we have, you know, very few awards in the 2.5 million range, but yet they add up to about the same as all the smaller and much more numerous awards. So our strategy here is, you know, at some level, it's an all the above strategy, right? But you know, agencies federal agencies are putting more emphasis on the larger awards. So we internally spend a lot of time focused on supporting large team proposals, and we have a number of large ones in right now, actually, which we're excited about. One of them, Regent Blankenship, being in digital agriculture, which we've been working a lot on. Different talk, but we can talk about that one too. So there's that. Okay, this is a fun chart. This chart shows for the years 15 to 20, the running total of all of our awards, and as plotted as a function of 1 to n, where 1 is the top PI awardee, and so number 1 on the x-axis is the faculty member with the most federal research awards. Number 2 is the second. Number 3 is the third, and so on. And so what's interesting here is that, and so we have about 900 million in federal awards over that 15 to 20 period, right? 3 faculty have generated 11% of those awards. Okay. 12 faculty have generated 20% of the awards, and so on, right? 80% of the awards are generated by about 200, and so on and so forth. So interesting to see how sharply peaked that is, and how important the role of our senior faculty is. And this is pretty typical, by the way, when I talk with VPR colleagues, right? It's there's a few really really large and productive groups in terms of funding. Again, and I want to make very clear that funding is not the only metric for faculty productivity, but this is an interesting thing to look at. Okay. Okay, just looking a little bit more at that kind of thing here. This is a quick look at how things look by rank. Okay. Again, for that same period, 15 to 20, just in terms of professor, associate professor, assistant, and then research faculty and other ranks, and then finally others. You can see the relative award contributions. In the small inset table there, you can see that I've shown the head count just for tenure track for professor, associate, assistant, because it's much simpler. It gets complicated when you get into the others. You can see, for example, the number of full professors we have, the number of awards. That's in units of dollars. I'll show data in terms of number of awards in a moment. And you can see that we basically by headcount about 42% of our faculty in 19 were full professor, and they garnered about 52% of the monetary awards, right? And then likewise you can see for associate and assistants, right? And that just reflects obviously the increasing maturing of our faculties that get better and more skilled at earning, right? And so it just points up the need for us to continually work with our faculty to help them submit the best proposals possible. This is just the last 2 slides. I just want to touch briefly on some equity issues and how things look for our women faculty. So this is, again, just looking at tenure track faculty. The first 3 columns, the number of faculty in each rank, the number of lead PIs for proposals in each rank, and then the number of awards in each rank. And so what you can see is that, and then the following columns look at the number of female faculty. So for full professor, we have about 27% of our full professors are women faculty, but you can see that even though that's the proportion within the faculty, it's not quite the proportion that are either lead PIs or involved in awards, right? And then you can see similar statistics for associate and assistant. So some of this reflects, probably a lot of historical inequities. We can talk more about that. I'll show another interesting slide on that in a moment. But this just gives us a snapshot of how our women faculty are doing with respect to awards and being lead PI compared to their proportion in the faculty. Okay. The last thing I'll show for discussion is just a quick snapshot at how the pandemic has magnified existing inequities in higher ed, right? So this is not a WSU plot. This is a plot of journal submissions to Elsevier journals. Some of you may know Elsevier is the biggest academic journal publisher. They have over 2,000 journals they publish. And what's shown here is for various categories: health, life science, physical science, and engineering, as a function of time from the first publication, both up to 20 years from your first paper, in the top row and beyond 20. During the pandemic, and this is for 2019 to 20, you can see that men submitted pretty much across most fields. Men submitted far more men faculty than women. And this probably reflects the heavy caregiving role that a lot of our women faculty had to perform during the pandemic, in addition to trying to do research, right? So in higher ed right now, amplification of inequities arising from by the pandemic is a big subject. And this just gives you a small hint of why. Okay. So anyway, I just want to make Regent Shower, you and others aware of this, and this is something we're looking at. It was discussed briefly at the dry run by Celestina and others. So that's pretty much my last slide. I've just got a few last thoughts here, which I've pretty much talked about. Again, high value awards are increasingly important. Small number, large value, et cetera. So I'll just stop there and take questions, because I know Daryl wants to introduce John and Celestina, and we want to hear about some of the exciting work in health sciences. So
I will just,
before Daryl takes it away.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. So I don't think that the Regents had the same presentation that you showed today. There were a few differences in slides. So
yeah,
I just want to pause for a minute. That's okay. And just see if there are any questions in particular around the slides that we didn't have to preview beforehand. So anybody have any questions or need us to go back through any of those slides that Dr. Keene shown? Okay. All right. It's such tremendous information. Really appreciate the presentation. Hearing no comments or other questions.
Lisa, Greg had a comment.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I can't. It's really hard for me to see.
I know. I don't know where to look. I think it's here. So I did have a question, because there was something that we talked about last time that's on this slide that the summation slide.
Oh, yeah.
Chris, the next one down. Yeah, that one. Which is the key messages and moving forward. So as your data showed, and as we sort of knew, a lot of our highly active research faculty are getting older.
Right.
And you're talking about the optimum hiring range between 40 and 49, bringing in as associate professor, or they're at their institution as associate professor, and we recruit them here as professor. A lot of the barriers to that recruiting are lab space and startup. And with the startup, a lot of times deals can be made in terms of F&A return to the senior faculty members, and that impacts expenditures in the short term. But what are we doing, I guess, to think about over the next few years to some of these really highly productive faculty groups start to phase into retirement? Because if you look at your age distribution, which is in the slides, it's pretty pushed up there in terms of age, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I get you said, Greg, a few minutes ago that people are aware of this. I think that, you know, they certainly are. I think it's even more pointed than many people might have thought. So, you know, I think it's, you know, your comment about startup is important. You know, we just issued a new EP2, revised F&A policy, where we actually have now started a program to help support some of these larger grants by providing some of the central F&A, help make them stronger proposals, just to help bring in that support staff and help bring in the new faculty that come with those larger grants. So I think we're all working on it. I think our deans, and I'm sure obviously our central Elizabeth and others are well aware of this too, but I wanted to just put the data here so people could actually see it and you know, be aware of it and talk about it more.
Okay.
Chris, I've got a question. So going back to the female faculty slide, which you know, I didn't see when we were going through the presentation, so I think it's one that we didn't have. You know, we've got assistant professors, if I understand this properly, so 48%. The assistant professor, is that 48% of the women are assistant professors?
Yep. 48% of the assistant professors are women.
Okay, so and I'm not sure what the overall age range is there, but if you're talking about putting a focus on hiring in the 40 to 49 timeframe, rather than bringing in more people from the outside, which may be important in certain areas where we don't have coverage, is there some sort of balance of thought about basically working to support these women assistant professors where you have quite a cadre there, and moving them up the ranks?
Yeah,
Because if we bring in associate professors, for example, in that realm, that cuts off the opportunities for this large pool of assistant professor women. It would seem to me, anyway.
Chris, I could speak to that if
Yeah,
you'd
go.
like.
Please. Thanks,
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
I mean, we've been, excuse me, I have bad allergies today. We've been focusing on this issue of really mentorship. And I don't just mean top-down mentorship, but network-based mentoring. We started up a mentoring program this spring that we're going to expand this coming fall, where, you know, groups of women who are trying to get promoted to associate or from associate to full. There's a lot of national data to show, especially that even after tenure, there's a lag for women being promoted to full professor, often because they take on a lot of extra service responsibilities for the university, or have caregiving responsibilities or other burdens. And so we're really focusing on this in our tenure promotion mentoring, and making sure we're being broad in our criteria of the products of scholarship. We're recognizing any impediments brought by the pandemic, giving flexibility, allowing for COVID-related statements, and, you know, really just working hard to figure out how to address exactly what you're saying, is promote from within for all faculty, for all assistant professors. But I think, to Greg's point, we also need to look in key areas at bringing people in at the associate or even full level. If we do tend to start having retirements, we really want to have the full spectrum of demographic faculty.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the other piece of this is the awards, because it's just making sure that when people think about who to put in for awards, that women are included in that. And just, I think that sometimes it's not something that's necessarily deliberate. It's more like oversight. They just don't think that direction. I think of my friend over here first, type of thing. So anyway, I'm glad, I figured you all are on top of it, but it's just.
No, it's a very good, important issue.
Right.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Regarding this area as well, any idea in the breakdown of women of color?
So Regents, certainly, yeah, I believe IR has a lot of that data, but I haven't had a chance to get this through the awards. By the way, Des has the slides. One of the reasons you didn't have them until now is because it took a while from the last meeting to actually generate the data. We just finished this a couple of days ago. That exists. We could look at it, but I don't have it right here.
Regent Serna, I do have some some information on that. We actually, you know, obviously demographic data is self-reporting, and we have a very large proportion of our faculty who do not report. I'm trying to remember, I think we only have data for about 60%, maybe 63% of our faculty. And so what that means is that we don't have very good sense of this. And what we would like to do is try to sort of have a PR campaign. I think faculty don't realize why that would be important to self-report, but it also helps us to make sure that we're being equitable and inclusive, and that we're doing our very best to make sure faculty are successful. So we're hoping in general to have a broad campaign this fall, because it's useful for things like tenure promotion, for grants, for mentoring. And we just don't have good data right now because, as I say, it's self-reported data.
So when you say they don't report, again, is that they don't report what, I guess, that they're,
That we ask people for racial and ethnic information in our human resource databases, and we only have that information. I don't have the exact number, but there's a large proportion who don't report any demographic or racial data, and so we aren't able to draw significant conclusions because of that currently. But we know that it's an issue and that we want to start working on that so we can get more comprehensive data so we can answer exactly your question.
yeah, thank you.
Other questions? And I would just ask, go ahead and speak up if you have other questions, since we're in a hybrid scenario with some in person and some actually on the phone and Zoom. So if you have anything else, please just speak up.
I just had a comment. If we could ask the provost to have a tickler on that subject and report back to us
Absolutely.
in the fall, and progress report possibly on gathering pertinent data and then what the data might tell us.
Sounds good.
And I think Regent Blankenship, you're also speaking not only to the breakdown of the women that might be people of color, but expanding that beyond that so that we could look at kind of the faculty and all of that race and ethnicity data would be helpful. So.
Indeed.
Great. Okay. All right. Dr. Keen, I'll let you introduce and move us over to our next presentation.
Yeah, so Daryl will introduce the next segment, and again, Regent Shower, Des does have these for you, so she can get into it.
Great, and thanks, Chris, and welcome to Spokane, folks. So I want to let you know that Vice President Keen made the suggestion that maybe we have a couple of our superstar scholar educator leaders present. So part of what you're going to hear today is about what WSU has done in response to the pandemic. So what I would like to do to highlight these two individuals, because they would never describe themselves this way, but I want to give you a sense of their accomplishments. So bear with me for a couple of minutes, please, as I describe Dr. Barbosa-Leiker and Dr. Roll. So Dr. Celestina Barbosa-Leiker is an associate professor in the College of Nursing, and she serves as the Vice Chancellor for Research at Washington State University Health Sciences Spokane. Her responsibilities are here on campus, but they also extend across the system. Dr. Barbosa-Leiker's primary research investigates infant and maternal health and gender differences in substance use. Her research also focuses on the transition from pregnancy to parenthood in women with substance use disorders. She's currently leading an interdisciplinary team to assess mothers, infants, and healthcare providers in order to better care for women with substance use disorders, with emphasis on all perinatal women during COVID-19 pandemic. The results of these studies will help better educate healthcare providers and pregnant women, inform maternal and infant health policy, and improve standards of care. Celestina is an elected member of the Washington State Academy of Sciences, a member of numerous professional associations, including the American Psychological Association, and her research has led to over 100 publications. She is also a recent recipient of the YWCA Woman of Achievement Award. Dr. John Roll is the Vice Dean for Research in the College of Medicine, and he serves as the Associate Vice President for Strategic Initiatives for WSU Health Sciences. Dr. Roll has enjoyed faculty appointments in WSU Departments of Medicine, Psychology, Neuroscience, Nursing, prevention science, nutrition and exercise physiology, and health policy administration. He was appointed by Washington State Governor Gregoire as a vice chair of the Governor's Council on Substance Abuse and as an executive commissioner on the Eastern State Hospital Advisory Board. John has published nearly 200 articles and that have been cited more than 7,000 times. He's internationally recognized for his work on treating addiction and has been continuously funded by the National Institutes of Health for over 25 years. He is a fellow of 5 major scientific societies, and he is an elected member of the Washington State Academy of Sciences. We're pleased that these 2 scholar leaders are presenting today, and they'll tell you a little bit about WSU's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So Celestina, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Daryl. Can you all see my screen?
We currently see the PowerPoint in edit mode, and now it is full screen. Looks good.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Daryl. Thank you all for the invite to come here. What a great discussion so far. This has just been so fantastic to hear all of your stellar questions. I'm so glad that they're being asked and that that folks have the opportunity to come back to address these great questions, particularly around disparities in research. This morning, we're going to spend some time, John and I are going to spend some time sharing with you about COVID-19 research across the entire WSU system. So I'll start off very briefly with some research statistics so you can get a sense of the successes that we've had in just this past year. John will then give a really general overview of all of the research publications related to COVID-19 research. And then both him and I we'll go into just a little bit more detail on a couple of studies that we're part of so that you can get a sense of the impact that our COVID-19 research has already had across the state and across the nation. I have edited these slides, so I'm happy to answer questions as they go if they look just a little bit different. And then also you'll have the updated slides as well. So to start, I just wanted to start here with our current areas of research excellence in the health sciences. This is everything from addictions to sleep and performance. And I wanted to start with that because as we added COVID-19 research into our expertise here this past year, we did not stop our areas of research excellence. So we added this work on top of what we're doing, and really most of us added this intersection between what we were doing. So for example, addictions work plus COVID-19 research on top of that. So it was, some of us had to pivot a little bit more than others to keep research programs going and to contribute to the pandemic in this way. But we also did keep our areas of research excellence going. We also engaged in COVID-19 testing. So you can see the breakdown there across the Spokane and Pullman campuses. And then, of course, we supported vaccine efforts. That number there of 20,000 in the region, that's old press, so I know the number is much greater now. And that was just from the College of Nursing. That was getting the press there and putting shots in arms across the region. We're also storing vaccine on the Spokane and Pullman campuses. Related to COVID-19 research, we have submitted 138 COVID-19 related proposals seeking over $111 million. 50 of those awards were funded, totaling over $72 million. Now, $56 million of that was CARES funding from the U.S. Department of Ed. So that brings us to about $16 million in COVID-19 related research just in this past year. And it took a while to write those proposals. So it's probably closer to 9 to 10 months really that we had to obtain that funding. And we've published now close to 100 peer-reviewed publications related to COVID-19. And I'll hand it over now to John Roll to share what those topics of those publications were on.
Thanks, Celestina. I appreciate that. And thank you all for inviting us. I'm having a little connectivity issues. What a pandemic thing to say, I know. So I'll leave my photo up while I talk, but I'll come back in person if you have any questions, so I don't interrupt the flow of the talk here. As Celestina mentioned, we have nearly 100 publications. I want to point out that means those were, as Celestina described it, pivoted efforts. Those probably aren't largely from those grants that she just discussed. That will come. To get a published research presentation means you have to get regulatory approval, conduct the research, submit for peer review. So this is really the tip of the iceberg that I'm going to talk about today. And what I hope you'll take from it is you'll share my absolute unending pride in our faculty who have responded with such grace and skill during these difficult, challenging times to bring their scholarship to bear on very important issues. It would, of course, those of you who know me, be my pleasure to talk about these projects in great detail. I could take the entire rest of your Regents meeting and we could have fun, at least I would, but I have about 6 minutes to get through this. So I'm going to just categorize these areas of scholarship into broad areas with apologies to my faculty friends. I won't mention faculty names. I'll just identify the colleges that are primarily invested in this sort of work. So with that, I'll start. We have a large area of emphasis in modeling in terms of published papers. These largely come out of arts and science, veterinary medicine, medicine, and engineering. This has included work on optimizing models, using historic data from other pandemics to inform models of the current situation. We've had specific models on surge capacity, hospital capacity, vulnerability to COVID, which I will talk about at the end, work in how to manage sporting events and incarcerated populations. A side note, Dr. Amram from the College of Medicine was based on some of this work, was invited to be part of the State Department of Health Modeling Committee. We've done a fair amount of actual work on the virus. This comes out of veterinary medicine, medicine, and arts and sciences. This has been things like how the virus works. What is the origin of the virus? How do variant reinfections happen? What are the therapeutic viral markers? We have the College of Education. What a great resource. Education has been drastically impacted by the pandemic, and under the leadership of the College of Education and in partnership with nursing and medicine, there have been publications focusing on K-12, medical students, residents, teachers, international students, and educational theory. The Carson College has made substantial contributions to the literature on impacts to the hospitality industry, including specifically gaming, restaurants, and hotel impacts. The Murrow College, we have so much great stuff here. If I had my camera on, you'd see me beaming with pride. The Murrow College in Medicine have collaborated to look at how the media impacts the adoption of protective behaviors. We have work in patient management coming out of arts and sciences, medicine, and pharmacy. As Celestina mentioned, a lot of work on addiction during COVID. That's largely coming out of nursing and medicine. The development of novel therapeutics from pharmacy, veterinary medicine, arts and sciences. Racial and ethnic discrimination coming out of medicine and Connors. Mental health from Connors, medicine, nursing, and arts and sciences. Work in economics, especially how the COVID epidemic has impacted risk perceptions and how economic stressors influence pandemic type behaviors. We've had publications on the politics of vaccination coming out of medicine and Murrow. With veterinary medicine, we've had several publications on animal-human interactions, looking at things like transmission between species and the benefits of having a pet during quarantine. Food insecurity, work on this coming out of Connors. Work on incarceration from arts and sciences. Some really cool work, I think, on stigma related to infectious diseases out of the College of Arts and Sciences. A lot of work on health behaviors and activities of daily life. This comes out of arts and sciences, Connors, nursing, medicine, education, Murrow. We've had work on impacts to tribal communities, primarily out of nursing and arts and sciences. I will mention that from the College of Medicine, I reached Dr. Deidre Buchwald, was recently invited to address President Biden's COVID task force. We've had some fascinating work on the history of pandemics out of arts and sciences and vet med. And we've had some other work that's kind of across things that's really opportunistic and great, I think. It's work on things such as how do you host virtual events? How do you deliver virtual healthcare? How do you conduct virtual research? And then the last two I want to talk about will lead into some work that Celestina is going to wrap this presentation up with. And that's protective factors in human breast milk. That's a partnership out of arts and sciences and nursing, as well as perinatal experiences. We also have two areas of scholarship that I think are somewhat unique to Washington State University and represent great opportunities. They have more of an industry focus. One is our Laboratory for Atmospheric Research and Engineering, which looks at airborne viral spread. And then we have people throughout the system who look at how can we build better personal protective equipment, or even engage in recycling of existing personal protective equipment. So with profound apologies to my faculty friends for reducing your hard work to 4 minutes of talking like that, those are some of the areas of work we've done, much more to come. I'll finish up by just showing you 2 slides here. And Celestina has the first one up for me. Thank you. This is a vulnerability index that was published recently. This took things like age, chronic health conditions, population density, and utilized those to predict where vulnerable hotspots were for COVID infection. This was influential, especially early on in the pandemic, to help guide public health responses. The dark red areas represent areas where there was heightened vulnerability and where we could direct some of our early public health interventions. One of the things I've been most concerned about in the pandemic is deferred health care. If I were going to predict, I would say that I think that that may have a more profound impact on the health of the world than the actual virus itself. And if Celestina would give me the next slide, these data weren't in your packet, they were embargoed, and data will be coming out pretty soon in a pretty prestigious journal. This is work by Dr. Amran, Amiri, Monsivais, me, and our great colleagues at Multicare. And in the upper left screen, you can look at mammograms, total breast screenings. If you look at 2019, you can see there were 55,678. 2020, that number was greatly reduced. If we drop down, you can see the impact is felt greater in the rural areas of our state. If you look at race, ethnicity, you can see some troubling trends there where American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hispanic women's had lower rates than white women. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, if we look at insurance type, the one I would want to focus on is the self-pay group. If you're self-paying for your healthcare, there is an awful, dramatic decrease in acquiring this potentially life-saving care. I think that speaks so clearly to the gendered economic impacts of this pandemic. Women often are bearing the brunt of this economic downturn. If you can't take care of yourself in terms of healthcare, that's a sad situation and one we badly need to address. So with that, and again, sorry for whipping through all that so quickly, would love to talk in more detail about any of it. Let me turn it over to my colleague of longstanding and a phenomenal scientist, Dr. Barbosa Leiker, to talk about some of her really exciting work. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much, John. So just to finish up here, I wanted to share a little bit of the work that our research lab has conducted during the pandemic. So like many researchers, very quickly, we were sent home. We took a quick pause. We weren't in our labs. We were working from home, and we were trying to figure out how do we continue our research safely from a distance, but also how do we contribute to the research and better understanding of COVID-19, and how can we make sure that folks in the state of Washington and across the world really are as healthy as possible. So what our lab did was we joined forces with about 6 other labs across the university, and we formed the WSU COVID-19 Infant, Maternal, and Family Health Collaborative. And we launched a couple of studies right away because we knew that families were going to be very impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have had 2 publications with the perinatal population. So we focused on pregnant and 1 year out postpartum families during the pandemic. You can see there on the left, the colleges that are represented just in these 2 studies alone. We have grants going out the door and many other publications to follow. We've had student presentations on all of our topics here. So to share just a little bit about this study, we knew right away that everyone was stressed during the pandemic, but pregnant women were going to have additional stressors. Right away, I believe it was the New York Times was the first to kind of report that women were having to deliver alone without a partner, and this was causing a lot of stress to currently pregnant women. We knew that most pregnant women and postpartum women were unfortunately being told, just by the nature of the virus, that they didn't know what was going to happen if they got COVID while they were pregnant, or what was going to happen to their fetus or their baby. That's an additional stress as well. And the reason why this is so important for us to address is because we know that psychological stress impacts fetal development and the development of the child. So we knew that in order to protect the next generation, we needed to help mitigate stress during pregnancy, during the pandemic. So we heard about these primary stressors, everything from the baby contracting COVID, moms hearing that if they deliver their baby, if their baby tests positive, they're not going to be able to touch their baby for 2 weeks. They were going to have to isolate from their newborn. Their self or partners contracting COVID, lack of support, not having their partner there in the delivery room, this new world that their baby was entering into, this new isolating world that their baby was entering into. And then of course, job loss within their family, not knowing how they were going to be able to take care of their newborn. We did see within our data that women of color and women with lower incomes were more impacted. They had more stress and less support than non-Hispanic white women and women with higher incomes. So we were able to be one of the first labs in the nation to show with data that there are these disparities that continued throughout the pandemic. In the stories, in the words of the women, we see it most succinctly here with the one on the left. I was afraid to die and leave my baby behind. That's the level of stress that we're talking about from our participants here. Not just the regular daily stressors that we're having, but this really strong fear of death. We also heard about, I'm worried that my husband and I won't have enough money to support our baby. And then lastly here, this quote, I'm most worried about the world around us changing so drastically that I can't give the baby the life I had planned on. Again, these are stressors on top of the normal stressors that we were having during the pandemic. And our goal was to highlight these, to disseminate these immediately to healthcare providers so that we can make sure that the next generation coming out of the pandemic was healthy. So with that, I'll end there. I know we're at time here, and so I'm happy to answer any questions should there be any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a tremendous presentation. It's also stunning in a really kind of sad and terrifying way. So as I look at some of this information and I think about the impact on women in particular and women of color, it just continues to emphasize the importance of the work that you're doing and elevating this information so that it becomes something that we all are paying attention to and are more awake to. So thank you very much for not only the work, but for providing us with this great insight. Enrique, did you have something you wanted to share too?
General, you had mentioned that this was going to be published in a major publication soon. What's that going to be?
Well, I'd rather not say because of the embargo.
Just between you and me, nobody else is listening,
So. I believe it will be out next week, and it will be my pleasure to make sure you get a copy.
Yeah, I'd like to know. Just between you and me. So yeah.
Please share that. That would be great. Questions, comments?
Lisa?
Yeah, hi, Laura.
I just want to say the entire presentation is so full of just amazing things, even though when you were going through them, John, they were just ticklers, if you will. Before your list got longer and longer, I was thinking, well, wow, this would make a great poster session cocktail hour with the Regents at some point in time. And then I thought, well, there'd be so many of them because there's so much going on. So I just encourage you to sort of think about what makes sense to share this information, because I just think it's all just really fascinating, important work. And I'd love to figure out how we could all get an overview to really see all the great stuff that's going on university-wide with this work.
Can I just say, I think this is really newsworthy. and something that the WSU really needs to put out there, because particularly in these times of, with COVID and racial reckoning, and it's just tremendous information. So yeah, need to do something.
Thank
Lisa,
you.
can I ask a question? This is
Yeah.
Brett.
Absolutely, Brett.
Well, first of all, Chancellor Dewald has been a tremendous advocate for the two of you, so it's wonderful to finally hear you present in person. A great presentation. I wanted to back up to the graphic of the vulnerability index. I was curious how some of that was generated. I'm familiar with some of the red areas, but it didn't necessarily translate into outbreak areas. So I was curious how the vulnerability was calculated and whether people responded properly to avoid outbreaks or whether we just got lucky. Because I see where some of the outbreaks happened, but some of the vulnerability didn't rate as high. So if you wanted to drill
Sure.
down on some of that, it'd be helpful.
Be happy to do that. I'd also be happy to send you that publication based on that as well. It was based on ongoing work that our team does in the CHASE lab, which is really a spatial epidemiology lab, looking at health inequity throughout the state and the region. Some of the early predictors of vulnerability to COVID infection were age, chronic health condition, and population density. And those were the main things that drove coloring an area red, if you will. As to why we didn't always see a correlation between where COVID reared its unfortunate face and these predictions, I think that's a really multiply determined outcome. Perhaps this work did have an influence on that, but there are so many things going on, especially early in the pandemic space, and so much activity geared towards addressing it, engaging in public health behavior, some communities not engaging in that behavior as readily as others. It will be a challenge, I think, to really nail down on what the causes are for some of these. And as I say this, I realize this is such an academic answer. So I apologize. You wanted a clear answer and I reverted to professor speak, but that's about what I'm at today.
Thank you.
I think any insights that you can share, John, that we can read would be great. I think there's so much here. Like to Laura's point, I just kind of want a session just on this portion of the presentation, and I want to be able to ask some more questions. So anything you can send to us so that we're able to do some reading on our own would be great. And I would be interested in, as Laura suggested, perhaps a cocktail hour or some time where we can spend some real attention on this. And I do think that the broader Regent group would benefit from this a little bit more in depth. So anything you can send, we'd appreciate.
That would be great. I do want to reiterate, the faculty will be much more eloquent spokespeople for their own work than I will be.
We appreciate meeting you and also enjoy meeting other members of the faculty as well. So would be open to that.
Yeah, certainly, Lisa, we can, Daryl and I, we'll all talk. Everyone here.
Good. It's incredibly relevant. And to Enrique's point, part of what we can also help do is help push that message out. There's so much that is happening at WSU right now. COVID is on everyone's mind, and the work that's being done and the continued leadership is, again, centering what our land grant mission is. And we're doing it in such a powerful way. I really hope that we can share more of these stories in a broader way. And it starts with us understanding a little bit more and helping to push that out too. So great work.
I also have to admit that I have a little bit of selfish reasons behind it, because I do a podcast, and this we focus on communities of color, and specifically this would be great information to be able to cover. So anyway, So yeah, I'm selfish, but hey, what the heck?
I don't think that's selfish. I think that's helping to continue to broaden the message out to a larger audience. So great job, Enrique. Anything else, Greg? I want to make sure I just pause and allow for any questions or comments that you want to make.
None.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? I know I'm kind of cutting into break time, but this is just really important work. So appreciate this presentation and the work that's being done. I want to make sure I'm following my agenda here before we wrap up. Does anybody have anything else that they want to ask in particular around this topic?
Oops. Yeah, Regent Sauer. So Vice President Kerr joined us in the middle somewhere. I'm hoping you saw that, but anyway, I'm not sure if Colleen wanted to mention anything.
I just wanted to thank Professors Barbosa, Leiker, and Professor Roll for joining us. And thank you, Darrell, for the introduction, and just appreciate all of your work on this.
Regent Shower, I think that your suggestion of identifying a time or a forum to dig into this and Dr. Roll's recommendation about hearing from faculty would really be well taken. It has been a real privilege to work with John and Celestina over the course of the past year. We have done an extraordinary job in taking the research portfolio and having it be more publicly engaged in real time. And it's been a comprehensive effort between the Spokane and the Pullman campuses. And so I think it would be really wonderful for the Regents to hear from multiple faculty members from multiple colleges.
Excellent. I've added it to my list, so I'm going to follow up to make sure that we make that happen. So thanks, Colleen.
And in my presentation, I will do a road sign to some of that work as well.
Okay, great. Good. Okay, I see Des, and I'm sure she is hoping that I'm going to wrap us up here. So I just want to mention that we're at the point where we're going to conclude the committee meeting, and we'll be taking a break, and we'll be back at 10:30 to resume our next committee meetings. And the YouTube link for the meetings can be found on the WSU Board of Regents website. And just again, want to thank all of the presenters and the work that's being done. This is an exciting time to share the great work that is really relevant in our world right now, and particularly in Washington State. So thank you, everyone. And I will go ahead and close the meeting and see my fellow regents at 10:30 for our next committee meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.